The encounter, the human walked alone across the dry alien land. The sky above him was not blue, but a strange purple color, glowing with two suns. His boots pressed into the cracked ground, and each step made a sound like breaking glass. He was tired, hungry, and far away from his ship, but he kept walking. He was searching for a signal, for life, for anything. The land was silent, too silent. No birds, no insects, no sound of water, only the hot wind that carried the smell of burned stone. It felt as if the whole world had been destroyed, and maybe it had. The human's name was Daniel. He was an explorer, a soldier once, but now just a traveler who had gone too far. When his ship was damaged, he had no choice but to land here. At first, he thought this planet was empty, just another dead world. But then, he heard something, a sound, faint and soft, carried by the wind. At first, he thought it was only his imagination, but when he stopped and listened carefully, he heard it again. It was the sound of crying. Daniel's hand went to his weapon, a simple old plasma pistol. He was used to danger, but crying? That was strange. Slowly, he followed the sound, moving between broken towers and walls. The land here was filled with ruins, as if once there had been a city. Now it was nothing but ash and stone. The crying grew louder. It led him to a great broken palace, its high gates lying shattered on the ground. The palace was burned, black marks covering its walls. But inside, there was movement. Daniel stepped carefully, his heart beating fast. In the middle of the ruined hall, he saw them. A woman, her skin a pale silver, her hair long and glowing, faint blue. Her clothes were torn, but he could see she was once royal. Beside her was a small child, no more than 5 years old. The child's eyes were big and bright, shining with fear. The woman saw him and froze. For a moment, Daniel thought she would scream or run, but instead she fell to her knees. Her voice shook, her words heavy with despair. "Human, please, claim me as yours. Protect us." Daniel was stunned. He had seen many strange things in his life, but never this. Why would an alien princess beg a human, a stranger, with such words? The child clung to her mother's torn dress, staring at Daniel with wide eyes. "Please," the woman whispered again. "Take us. Make us yours. Or we will die." Daniel lowered his weapon slowly. He had questions, so many questions. Who were they? What happened to this place? Why did she believe a human could save her? But the desperation in her eyes was too real. This was no trick, no trap. This was fear. He looked around the hall. Burned banners hung from the walls, marked with a strange symbol. The palace had been attacked, destroyed, and now only this woman and her child remained. The child's small voice broke the silence. "Mother, will he help us?" The woman's silver eyes filled with tears. "I do not know, my daughter, but we must try." Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. He was only one man, stranded on a broken world. He had no army, no power. Yet this princess, this mother, looked at him as if he were her last hope. For a long moment he said nothing. The air was filled only with the sound of the child's soft sobs. Finally, Daniel spoke, his voice low. "Tell me why. Why do you want me to claim you?" The woman raised her head slowly. Her face was beautiful but tired, marked with pain. "My people are gone. My enemies hunt me. They want my daughter as a trophy, and me as their slave. If you claim us, if you make us yours, they cannot take us. Your kind humans are known for strength, for never giving up. Please, be our shield." Daniel's eyes narrowed. He was no king, no master. He was just a man trying to survive. But when he looked at the child, trembling and holding her mother's hand, he felt something stir inside him, a memory of why he once became a soldier. To protect those who could not protect themselves, the princess lowered her head, pressing it to the ground before him. "Take me as yours. Take my daughter. Make us your family. I will give myself to you, body and soul, if only you will save her." Daniel's breath caught in his throat. He did not know what to answer. All he knew was this. He had stepped onto a dying world, and now, in front of him, knelt an alien princess and her child, begging him not for riches, not for power, but for life. And somehow, he knew. This was only the beginning, the desperate plea. Daniel stood frozen in the ruined palace. The alien princess was still kneeling, her head low, her silver hair spread across the dusty floor. The child pressed close to her mother's side, staring up at Daniel with wide eyes that shone in the pale light. Daniel had seen fear before. He had seen desperation, but this was something else. This was surrender. He slowly lowered his weapon. "I don't understand," he said, his voice rough. "Why me? I'm no hero. I'm not a king. I'm just a man who crashed on your world." His words were sharp, but his eyes softened as he looked at the child. The little girl's hands shook as she clutched at her mother's arm. The princess raised her head. Her face was beautiful, yet broken, her silver eyes heavy with sadness. "You are human," she whispered, as if that alone explained everything. Daniel frowned, confused. "What does being human have to do with this?" She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. "My people are gone, our armies crushed, our cities burned. The invaders left nothing behind but death. They hunt me because I am the last of my bloodline, the last princess of a fallen crown. They want my daughter as a prize. They want me as their slave." The little girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder. Daniel felt a weight inside his chest. He wanted to oak away, but he could not. There was something in the princess's eyes, a fire still alive beneath the pain. "I cannot fight them alone," she continued. "But if you claim us, they cannot take us. Among the stars, a claimed woman cannot be stolen. If you are our shield, they will hesitate. They will fear you." Daniel shook his head slowly. He did not understand their customs, their laws, but he understood one thing. She was asking him to be more than a protector. She was asking him to tie their lives to his. "Why me?" he asked again, this time softer. "You don't even know me." The princess's lips trembled. "I have heard of your kind. Humans are different. You are stubborn. You are wild. You fight even when the battle is lost. I have nothing else to trust, no one else to turn to. If you leave, we die. If you take us, maybe we live." Her words echoed through the broken hall like a prayer. Daniel looked at the child again. Her eyes were wide, filled with tears. She whispered in a small voice, almost too soft to hear. "Please, protect her. Don't leave us." For a moment, Daniel felt the ground beneath him shift. He was not supposed to be here. He was not supposed to be anyone's savior. But fate did not care. Fate had brought him to this moment. And now 2 lives hung in his hands. He turned away, walking a few steps. His boots echoed against the stone. He looked out through the broken walls of the palace. Far in the distance, dark shapes moved across the sky. Enemy ships. They were searching, hunting, and soon they would be here. Daniel clenched his fist. He thought of his own past, of battles long ago. He thought of comrades who had died, of people he could not save. And then he thought of this woman and her child, alone, afraid, yet still alive. If he walked away, he would be no different from the invaders who left this world in ruins, the Pikamti. Princess saw the change in his eyes as he turned back to her. She lowered her head once more, her voice breaking. "Claim me, human. I will give myself to you, all that I am, all that I have. Just promise me one thing. Save my daughter." Daniel's chest tightened. He had not expected this. Not today. Not ever. He had come here only to survive. But now survival was not enough. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The little girl's eyes brightened with hope. The princess trembled as he came closer. He reached down and touched her shoulder, his voice steady. "I don't own people," he said. I don't take slaves, and I don't want to be your master." Her body shook as she looked up at him. "But," Daniel continued, "I will protect you, both of you, for as long as I can. Not because you are mine, but because it's the right thing to do." The princess stared at him, tears running down her silver cheeks. The child reached out and touched his arm with her small hand. "Protector," she whispered again, but this time it sounded like a promise, like she already believed in him. Daniel looked once more toward the horizon. The enemy ships were coming closer, the sky glowing red with their engines. He tightened his grip on his pistol. The princess and her daughter were behind him now, waiting, trusting. And Daniel knew that whatever happened next, there was no turning back. This was no longer just survival. This was the beginning of something greater, the beginning of a fight he could not walk away from. The human's choice. Daniel stood at the broken gate of the palace. The wind carried dust across the ruins, and the sky burned red with the glow of enemy ships. The princess and her daughter stayed behind him, their figures small in the shadow of the great hall. He could hear the child's quick breathing, the soft sound of fear too young to hide. Daniel's hand tightened on his pistol. He had faced death before, but this time, death was not only his own. 2 lives now waited on his choice. He turned and looked at the princess. Her silver eyes followed him with silent hope. She was afraid, but she did not beg again. She had already given her words, already lowered her crown and her pride. Now she simply waited to see what kind of man a human truly was. Daniel took a slow breath. He remembered old battles. He remembered how many times commanders had told him to retreat, to save himself. But he had always stayed, always fought, because walking away was worse than death. He had lost friends, he had lost brothers, and he had carried that weight ever since. Now here was another choice, another moment where a life could be saved, or lost. The answer rose inside him like fire. He stepped closer to the princess. "I will protect you," he said firmly. "Not as your master, not as your king, but as your shield." The little girl's face lit with relief, and she pressed her small hand against his arm again. "Protector," she whispered, as if naming him. The princess bowed her head, her body trembling with silent tears. Daniel knew there was no turning back now. A sudden roar split the air. Enemy ships broke through the clouds, dark metal beasts shaped like knives. Their engines screamed as they circled above the palace, scanning the ruins below. A deep voice echoed from their speakers, filled with cruelty. "Princess of the fallen crown, surrender yourself, and your child may live." The princess froze, clutching her daughter close. Her eyes flicked toward Daniel, fear and trust fighting in her gaze. Daniel raised his pistol and stepped forward into the open courtyard. His voice was strong, steady. "She is under my protection now," he shouted. "She is claimed." The ships paused in the air, as if the very word had power. For a moment there was silence. Then laughter crackled from the speakers, harsh and mocking. "A human?" The voice sneered. "Yo, you think your kind can stop us? You are nothing but animals crawling in the dirt." Daniel's jaw tightened. Maybe they were right. Maybe he was just one man with one weapon. But he was human, and humans did not give up. He pointed his pistol at the sky, his finger steady on the trigger. "Try me," he growled. The first squad of enemy soldiers descended, their armor black and sharp, their weapons glowing red. They landed in the dust with heavy thuds, their eyes fixed on Daniel. Behind him, the princess whispered something in her own language, a prayer or a plea. The little girl clung to her mother, but her eyes never left Daniel's back. Daniel stood tall, his shadow stretched across the broken stones. He was only one man, but he would fight like 10. The enemy leader stepped forward, a tall warrior with cruel eyes. He pointed at Daniel with his blade. "Move aside, human. This does not concern you." Daniel shook his head slowly. "It concerns me now," he said, "because they are under my protection, and you will have to go through me first." The soldiers laughed, raising their weapons. Daniel lifted his pistol, his heartbeat steady. He knew he could not win by strength, but he had something else. Human cunning, human stubbornness, human rage. The kind of fight that burned even when the body was broken. He had faced impossible odds before, and he was still alive. This would be no different. The princess's voice rose behind him, strong despite her fear. "He has claimed us," she shouted. "You cannot touch us, not without war." The soldiers hesitated, glancing at one another. Even in their cruel eyes, Daniel saw a flicker of doubt. The law of claiming was known across the stars, and if they killed a human protector, it could spark something greater than conquest. It could spark rebellion. The leader growled and raised his blade higher. "Then war it will be," he hissed. Daniel's finger tightened on the trigger. The air between them was heavy, charged with fire and fear. The princess pulled her daughter close and whispered, "Not trust him, my child. Trust the human." The first shot rang out. A beam of light cut across the courtyard, striking the dust beside the enemy's feet. The battle had begun, and Daniel, the lone human, had chosen his side, the first battle. The courtyard fell silent after the first shot. Smoke rose from the burned stone where Daniel's pistol had struck. The alien soldiers laughed, their voices deep and cruel. "Is this the strength of a human?" The leader sneered. "Pathetic." Daniel ignored their words. He had been outnumbered before. He had been underestimated before. It was always the same. Enemies believed numbers would win, but humans did not fight with numbers. Humans fought with will, with fire, with the madness of survival. The soldiers raised their rifles, glowing red with deadly energy. The princess gasped and pulled her daughter into her arms. Daniel moved fast, rolling behind a broken pillar as the first volley of shots blasted the courtyard. Dust and stone exploded around him. He pressed his back to the pillar, breathing hard. One wrong move, and he would be nothing but ash. He closed his eyes for a moment, listening. He counted the footsteps, the rhythm of armor on stone. 3 on the left, 2 behind, 1 moving slow. The leader, Daniel, smiled faintly. They were too loud, too confident. That was their weakness. He leaned out and fired once, twice, 3 times. A soldier fell with a cry, his armor sparking as the beam cut through. The others roared in anger, but now they were cautious. Daniel ducked back, dust filling his lungs. "Human!" the leader shouted. "You cannot win. Surrender, and we may leave your body whole." Daniel smirked. "I've heard that before," he muttered. "Never ends well for the other guy." The princess watched from the shadows of the hall, her daughter clutching her tightly, her heart pounded with fear, but with something else. A strange, growing belief that maybe this human was more than a desperate man. Maybe he was truly the shield she prayed for. Daniel grabbed a shard of broken stone and threw it across the courtyard. The sound echoed, and 2 soldiers turned, firing blindly. In that instant, Daniel moved, rolling out and firing another shot. 1 more enemy dropped. The others cursed and fired, but their beams struck only empty dust. Daniel had already vanished behind another ruin. The leader growled in frustration. "Enough games! Crush him!" The remaining soldiers spread out, closing in. But Daniel had the advantage now. He was faster, smaller, harder to predict. They were machines of war, trained to follow orders. But he was human, trained to survive. He leapt from cover, firing again, his pistol glowing hot in his hand. Another soldier screamed and fell, smoke rising from his chest. The last 2 turned their weapons on him, beams ripping the air. 1 shot grazed his arm, burning his skin. Daniel gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain. He kept moving, kept fighting, because stopping meant death. The princess cried out, but Daniel did not fall. He pushed forward, closing the distance. He slammed into 1 soldier, knocking the weapon from his hands. They wrestled, armor against flesh, strength against will. The alien was stronger, but Daniel fought like a man possessed. He drove his knife into the gap of the armor, again and again. The soldier collapsed with a roar of agony. Only the leader remained now, his eyes burning with rage. He stepped forward, his blade glowing with cruel energy. "You are nothing, human," he spat. "You bleed, you break, you will fall like the rest." Daniel wiped the blood and sweat from his face. "Maybe," he said, raising his pistol with a shaky hand. "But not today." The leader charged, blade slicing the air. Daniel fired, the beam striking the leader's chest. The alien staggered but did not fall, his armor sparking. Daniel fired again and again, each show, it hitting harder. Finally, with a scream, the leader crashed to the ground, his blade shattering against the stone. The courtyard went silent. Smoke drifted in the air, the smell of burned metal and blood hung heavy. Daniel stood in the middle of the ruins, breathing hard, his pistol nearly empty. His arm bled, his body ached, but he was still alive. More importantly, the princess and her daughter were alive. The little girl peeked from behind her mother, her eyes wide with wonder. "Mother," she whispered, "the protector. He defeated them all." The princess's silver eyes filled with tears. She looked at Daniel as if seeing something impossible. One man had done what armies could not. Daniel lowered his pistol slowly, his hand shaking. He looked at the fallen soldiers, then back at the princess. "This is only the beginning," he said, his voice heavy. "They'll send more, stronger ones. They won't stop until you're gone." The princess stepped forward, her daughter in her arms. "But now, we have you," she said softly. "You are not only our shield. You are our hope." Daniel met her gaze. For a moment, the ruins felt less empty, less broken. But deep inside, he knew the battle was far from over. He had chosen his side, and war was coming. Secrets revealed. The smoke from the battle still hung heavy in the ruined palace. The courtyard was silent now, broken only by the crackle of burning armor. Daniel lowered himself onto a fallen stone, his body aching from the fight. Blood stained his arm where the beam had grazed him, but he ignored the pain. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning the horizon. He knew this was not over. Not yet. The princess moved slowly toward him, her daughter still clutched in her arms. Her silver hair was tangled, her royal clothes torn, but her posture was proud. Even after fear, even after surrender, there was still something regal, and the way she carried herself. She looked at him as if he were more than a man, more than flesh and blood. Daniel hated that look. He was no savior, no king, only a survivor with a gun. "Protector," she said softly, kneeling before him. "You have done what no other could. You defeated them alone." Daniel shook his head, his voice low. "They underestimated me. Next time they won't. Next time they'll send more." The little girl leaned forward from her mother's arms, her small voice breaking the silence. "But you will beat them too, won't you?" Daniel met her gaze, her innocent hope, and for the first time, he did not know how to answer. The princess touched her daughter's hair gently, then looked back at Daniel. "There is something you must understand," she said, her voice heavy. "When you claimed us, you did more than protect. You changed everything." Daniel frowned. "I told you. I don't own people," he muttered. "I said I'd protect you, that's all." The princess shook her head slowly. "No, human, that is not all. You do not know our laws, our customs, but they are as real as stone. When you spoke the words, when you stood between us and death, you became more than our shield. You became our bond." Her daughter whispered something in their alien tongue, and the princess nodded softly. She turned her silver eyes back to Daniel. "You are now tied to my bloodline, whether you wished it or not." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I never asked for that." "No," the princess said, "but fate does not ask. Fate takes." She rose to her feet, standing tall despite the ruin around her. "I am Princess Solara of the Lunari Crown, last of my line. My father was king of this world, my mother its queen. They fell when the invaders came, and with them fell our people." Her voice trembled, but she kept speaking. "My daughter, Lyra, is the last child of our blood, the last spark of a broken throne." Daniel stared at her, his mind racing. He had thought she was only a woman in need, a mother trying to save her child, but now he realized she was something greater, the final heir of a fallen empire, and by claiming her, he had stepped into a place he did not belong. "I don't want your crown," he said firmly. "I don't want to be king. I just want to get off this world alive." The princess's eyes softened, but her words were sharp. You cannot escape it now. The moment you shielded us, the moment you called us yours, the crown passed to you. Daniel laughed bitterly, shaking his head. This is insane, he muttered. I'm just a man with a broken ship and an empty pistol. But the princess stepped closer, her voice low and steady. No, Daniel, you are human, and that is why it must be you. He looked at her, confused and angry. What is it about humans? Why do you keep saying that like it means something? The princess knelt before him again, her daughter resting against her shoulder. Because in the stories of the stars, humans are the ones who never bow. You fight when all others surrender. You burn when all others fade. You are chaos. You are survival. That is why even the invaders fear you, even if they will never admit it. Daniel fell silent, her words cutting deeper than he expected. He had never thought of himself that way. He had only ever been a soldier, a man trying to make it through the day. But now, this princess, this last survivor of a royal line, looked at him as if he were destiny itself. He rose to his feet slowly. Let me make one thing clear, he said, his voice steady. I'll protect you and your daughter, but I don't wear crowns. I don't command kingdoms. I don't believe in fate. The princess lowered her head, hiding a faint smile. Perhaps, she said softly. But fate believes in you. Daniel turned away, staring out at the horizon. Far beyond the broken walls, the glow of enemy ships still burned in the distance. They would come again, stronger, fiercer, relentless. Boo. He had made his choice, and whether he liked it or not, the crown of a fallen people now rested on his shoulders. The little girl's small hand tugged at his coat. Protector, she whispered, her eyes wide and trusting. Will you stay with us? Daniel looked down at her, and for the first time since landing on this dead world, he smiled faintly. Yeah, kid, he said. I'll stay. The Alliance. The ruins of the palace grew quiet again, but the silence did not feel the same as before. Where once there had only been despair, now there was something different, a spark, small but alive. Daniel stood near the broken gate, his pistol heavy in his hand. Smoke from the dead soldiers drifted through the air. He watched the horizon, knowing more would come. They always came. The fight was not over. It was only beginning. Behind him, Princess Solara sat with her daughter. She bound Daniel's burned arm with a strip of her own torn dress. Her touch was gentle but steady. You fight like no one I have ever seen, she whispered. Daniel gave a small, tired laugh. You've never met a Marine, he said. The princess tilted her head, confused by the word. A soldier, he explained. Someone who refuses to fall, even when the ground is gone. Her silver eyes softened. Then perhaps the stories are true, she murmured. That humans carry fire inside them. The little girl, Lyra, tugged at Daniel's sleeve. Protector, she said in her small voice. Will you teach me to fight like you? Daniel crouched down, meeting her wide eyes. You're too young to fight, he said gently. But I can teach you something better. I can teach you how to survive. Solara watched as her daughter smiled for the first time since the palace fell. A fragile smile, but real. For the princess, it was like seeing sunlight through clouds. She realized then that Daniel had already become more than a shield. He was becoming something she had not dared to hope for. Family, but war was not far. That night, as the three of them rested among the ruins, Daniel could not sleep. He studied the enemy weapons, scavenging what he could from the fallen soldiers. Their rifles were heavy and alien, but he managed to strip the power cells and attach them to his pistol. Improvised, unstable, but stronger than before. Humans always built tools from scraps. It was their way of surviving in the cracks between greater powers. Solara watched him work, her daughter sleeping in her lap. You waste nothing, she said softly. Daniel shrugged. Can't afford to waste when you're outnumbered. The princess tilted her head. My people were proud. We built grand palaces and shining towers, but maybe that pride blinded us. We thought strength was in what we owned. You fight with nothing, yet you win." Daniel didn't answer right away. He looked at her, really looked, not just as a princess, not just as a survivor, but as a woman who had lost everything and still stood tall. Finally, he said, "Sometimes having nothing is what makes you dangerous, because then you've got nothing left to lose." Her eyes lingered on him, and for the first time she smiled faintly. Not a smile of royalty, not a smile of command, but a smile of trust. Something fragile, but growing. Days passed. Daniel taught Solara how to use the scavenged weapons. Her hands were steady, her aim sharp. She was no warrior before, but now she learned quickly. She had no choice. For her daughter, she would learn anything. In return, Solara taught Daniel the old paths of her people. Secret tunnels beneath the ruins, forgotten storage rooms, caches of old supplies hidden for times of war. Together they uncovered food, tools, even fragments of ancient armor. Slowly, piece by piece, survival became possible. Lyra followed them everywhere, her small steps quick, her laughter sometimes breaking through the silence. She called Daniel protector every time she spoke. To him, and each time the word weighed heavier on his heart. He had promised to protect, and now he could not imagine failing her. One evening, as the suns dipped low and the purple sky turned black, Solara and Daniel stood on the palace wall. Fires burned on the horizon, enemy camps preparing for another strike. "They will not stop," Solara said quietly. "They will keep coming until they crush what remains of us." Daniel's jaw tightened. "Then we make it cost them. Every step they take, every shot they fire, they'll bleed for it." She turned to him, her silver hair glowing in the dim light. "Do you truly believe one human can turn back an army?" Daniel smirked faintly. "Not just one human, but a human, a princess, and a stubborn little kid? Yeah, maybe." For the first time in many dark days, Solara laughed softly, the sound surprising even herself. "Perhaps you are more dangerous than an army," she said. "Perhaps you are exactly what fate intended." Daniel looked at her, his eyes steady. "I don't care about fate," he said. "I care about making sure your daughter grows up free. That's enough reason for me." The princess lowered her gaze, her heart heavy with gratitude and something more. She had begged him once, fallen to her knees, but now she saw him differently, not as a master, not as a savior, but as a partner, an ally, someone who stood beside her rather than above. The alliance was no longer born of desperation. It was becoming something stronger, something the enemy could not understand, a bond of trust, of survival, of shared fire. And on that night, as the stars burned above, Daniel knew one thing for certain: the war was coming, but they would not face it alone. The final stand. The night was heavy with silence, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the silence before thunder, before war. Daniel stood on the broken wall of the palace, his eyes fixed on the horizon. The enemy camps burned with hundreds of fires, stretching far across the plains. It low, okayed like a sea of stars, had fallen to the ground. Each flame was a soldier waiting to march. Each shadow was a weapon aimed at the ruins. Beside him, Princess Solara adjusted the alien rifle he had repaired. Her face was calm, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside her. She had lost her people, her family, her kingdom. Now all that remained was her daughter, her pride, and this one human who refused to let her break. Lyra clutched Daniel's hand, her small fingers trembling. "Protector," she whispered. "Will we win?" Daniel knelt, meeting her eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "But I promise you this. They'll never take you. Not while I'm breathing." At dawn, the enemy moved. Columns of armored troops marched across the plains. War machines rolled forward, their engines screaming. The ground shook beneath the weight of destruction. The invaders came not only to kill, but to erase, to burn away even the memory of Solara's people. Daniel raised his voice, calling the small band of survivors who had gathered in secret tunnels and ruined halls. They were broken, scattered, but not destroyed. Old soldiers, young farmers, servants, mothers, and children. All had suffered under the invaders. Now they stood ready to fight beside him. He looked at their faces, scarred but determined. "We don't fight because we expect victory," Daniel told them. "We fight because they think we're already finished. We fight because they think we'll bow, but humans don't bow, and neither do you." His words lit fire in their hearts. Solara stepped forward, her voice ringing clear. "My people, I once stood as your princess, but today I stand with you as your sister. This man has shed blood for us. He has taken nothing, yet given everything. He is not our master, but our shield, and together we rise." The survivors raised their weapons, their voices echoing across the ruins. For the first time in many dark years, hope breathed again. The battle came like a storm. The enemy charged, their armor glinting in the rising sun. But Daniel and the survivors met them with fire. Traps rigged through the palace corridors exploded. Collapsing walls, arrows, energy bolts, and human bullets rained down from the heights. Every step forward for the enemy was paid in blood. For the first time, the invaders hesitated. They had expected easy prey, not a cornered wolf. Daniel fought like a man possessed. He moved through smoke and fire, striking with precision. Every shot he fired was a promise kept. Every blade he swung was a vow repeated. Solara fought beside him, her aim deadly, her courage unshaken. And Lyra, hidden deep in the tunnels, prayed with the children, whispering Daniel's name as if it were a shield. Hours dragged into endless struggle. The palace shook, towers fell, the air burned. But still the survivors fought. For every fallen friend, two more rose in fury. For every wound Daniel took, he pushed harder. It was not strength alone that drove him. It was the sight of Solara refusing to kneel. It was the sound of Lyra's voice calling him protector. It was the knowledge that no one else would save them if he failed. At the height of battle, the enemy commander stepped forward, a towering figure clad in black armor, voice thundering across the field. "Human," he roared. "You dare stand against us. You are nothing, a fragile creature of bone and blood. You cannot win." Daniel, bloodied and bruised, lifted his weapon, his voice cut through the roar of war. "Maybe I can't win," he said. "Maybe I fall today, but if I fall, I'll fall standing, and you'll remember that it was a human who made you bleed." With a roar, he charged. The final clash was brutal, sparks flying, blades clashing. The commander's strength was monstrous, but Daniel's will was unbreakable. He fought with every scrap of fury left in him. Solara fired shot after shot, covering him. The survivors screamed their defiance, rushing the enemy line. The ruins became a storm of fire and blood. At last, Daniel struck true. His blade pierced the commander's chest. The armored giant fell, his roar dying into silence. And with that fall, the enemy broke. Their lines shattered, their courage burned away. The invaders fled into the plains, leaving only smoke and ruin behind. The survivors stood in stunned silence. They had done the impossible, not because they were stronger, but because they refused to die quietly. Solara walked to Daniel, who was barely standing. Blood stained his armor. His breath came ragged. She fell to her knees before him, not in fear, but in devotion. "You are no longer only our protector," she whispered. "You are our family, our leader, our hope." Lyra ran to him, tears streaming down her face. "Father!" she cried, clinging to him. And for the first time, Daniel allowed himself to smile, not the smile of victory, but the smile of belonging. The ruins still burned. The war was not finished. But something greater had been born in the ashes. A human, a princess, and a child had lit a fire that no empire could extinguish, and their story was only beginning. The end. Enjoyed the story? Like it and subscribe for more.